How's it going, everyone? November 9th edition of Octagon Outlook. I am your host, James Lynch. Got a special co-host here today. You know him over at My MMA News, The Scrap, the man behind the WMMA Today podcast, although I know he hates that name. It is Drake Riggs joining me here on the program. Drake, how's it going, buddy?
It is going, James. So happy to be here doing something with you again, my man. Always a pleasure. And, talking MMA and WMMA, I will say it. Happy to do
There you
so.
go. Yeah, no, for sure. No, if you guys aren't following Drake on Twitter, at Drake Riggs _ one of the best resources when it comes to women's MMA. And we're going to get into some of that here today, obviously, with a couple of the matchups. But let's get right into it. UFC Vegas 13 went down this past Saturday. An awesome main event between Glover Teixeira and Thiago Santos. And it is Glover Teixeira showing that age is just a number, going out there and getting the submission victory over Thiago Santos. I did not expect this to happen. I know Santos had the layoff and he had the injury and everything else heading into a big pivotal fight like this. But for him to go out there and not be able to finish Glover Teixeira, and for Glover to come back and get the submission win, looked unreal. And I'm a believer now in Glover Teixeira. I probably should have been the fight before, but what did you think of this performance, Drake? Because I thought Santos had him down and out at a certain point in the fight. And then for Teixeira to come back, be as fresh as he was late in that fight and get the submission win, I was so impressed by this. What did you think?
Yeah, it was absolute madness, man. I mean, two separate points where Thiago was really seemed close to the finish. In the first round, kind of had him on wobbly legs, and then dropped him, of course, in the second round, I believe, or whenever that was. Maybe it was the third round because the second round he got laid on for pretty much the whole time. Yeah, crazy, man. Glover absolutely never out of the fight. Like, we kind of forget this. It's kind of become his thing lately in this last stretch of his career where, maybe he'll take some big shots on the feet, but then the guys will go and rush to get the kill. And you forget, like, oh, his chin's pretty good. He recovers very quickly. And then once he gets a hold of you, you just kind of they lose themselves, and he takes advantage of it every single time. And this was the perfect example of that in this fight. Yeah, age is just a number for Glover, man. I think it's safe to say he's probably the best example of aging like a fine wine that maybe we've ever seen. There's a couple ageless wonders who are out there in MMA. I think, honorable mentions, of course, Yoel Romero and Miyu Yamamoto, who's 46-year-old grandmother who is one of the best atomweights in the world. So I want to give a shout out to her. But a Glover, man, he might be the best ever when you just think about these are top former title challenger guys that he's doing this to, finishing them and, essentially dominating when he's not just getting clipped, which is kind of, you can't really knock him for it. It's kind of impressive that he's able to survive this and then go and do what he does right after. So it's really mind-blowing and such an amazing story, honestly, to see Glover be able to do this late in his career and what had the journey for him to get to the UFC in the first place and how long it took. Everyone thought he should have been there sooner. Visa troubles, like a ridiculous thing to get there. Gets there, does good, and gets a title shot. And then the layers and roller coaster ride that he's had, it's insane.
Yeah, and just think about it. That could have been the storyline after Saturday night was here's two fighters in Jan Blachowicz and Glover Teixeira who had, ups and downs in their career. But, in Blachowicz's case, coming back, winning the title, and Glover Teixeira, 5-fight winning streak now after losing a few, getting finished by Rumble and Alex Gustafsson. And that would have been a great storyline. But no, we have this other fight we have to talk about. So we'll get into that a little bit later, in terms of what might be next for Glover and obviously what's going on in the light heavyweight division. But really big win for Glover. For Thiago Santos, he kind of came out with a post yesterday. I saw, just talking about how he didn't follow the game plan and whatever. You know what? I think he really felt he was going to finish Glover Teixeira. I think a lot of other people felt that way as well. I don't think he can be too hard on himself because Glover just looks like the Terminator right now. So I think you could give him, pretty much anyone in the top five and get him right back on the winning track here. But yeah, certainly big win there for Glover Teixeira. We'll talk about kind of what's next for him in a second here. Let's get to the co-main event. We've got Andrei Arlovski and Tanner Boser, and it is Andrei Arlovski once again showing that age is not a number, getting the decision victory over the Canadian. I actually scored this fight for Tanner Boser. Canadian bias aside, I had him winning 29-28. I don't know if the judges just aren't counting leg kicks or what the deal is, but I thought Boser landed a lot more in that regard. But at the same time, Boser didn't really go for it. I mean, this was a disappointing performance from him. He didn't really have that killer instinct that we saw in the two fights previously where he got those finishes. And I know that's easier said than done over a savvy veteran in Andrei Arlovski, but Tanner Boser losing, Andrei Arlovski winning. I don't think you'll see Arlovski fight for a title again, but this obviously, was a very important fight. And before I get to your thoughts on this, I got to read this post that Tanner put on here. Don't want to get us in trouble with the censors here, but there's a little bit of swearing. But I got to mention, Tanner put this out here. He says, "I lost by unanimous decision to Andrei Arlovski. Was the fight really close? Yes. Did I lose? Yes. I'm not happy with myself, and I have to get better. I had a big opportunity, and I blew it. Arlovski is a legend, and it was an honor to share the fight with him. I'm not going to read the messages in my inbox, just so you know that if you message me some rude stuff, I won't read it, but still, go F yourself. Thank you. Golf clap for Tanner Boser. I love that. That's how you handle a loss. And he's 100% right. I already saw people commenting, being like, you should do this, you should do this. If you're an expert coach, you're not going on Twitter and giving someone advice in a public forum. You do it privately. Anyways, your thoughts on the fight, Drake?
Yeah, man. At another Agents Wonder, yeah, I mentioned that I was tweeting that out as that fight happened, and then Glover's like, "Hold my beer, man. I'll show you what an Agents Wonder really looks like." But yeah, Arlovski, another guy who crazy kind of the peaks and valleys that he's had. I mean, one of those guys who we have totally thought that he is done, needs to retire at like multiple points in his career, but then he goes on these winning streaks again, which really it just doesn't make sense. But yeah, he was even throwing like hook kicks in this fight. It was really weird and crazy to see the development that Andre Arlovski still the developments that he's making 20 years into the sport. As for the fight itself, though, I mean, yeah, historically, it seems like judges might not value leg kicks as much as other strikes. And, of course, it all comes down to damage, essentially. The scoring criteria, whatever strikes do the most damage. And if you're going to look at it that way, I mean, it didn't seem like the leg kicks were affecting Arlovski all that much, but they were still landing a plenty, and you could visually see the bruising on his leg and everything. So I think you got to count him a little bit more. I did score it for Tanner rounds 2 and 3. But that round 2, I thought was very close. Could have been the swing round. I totally understand both arguments for it. Whoever wins that fight, not a robbery whatsoever. Very close. But yeah, I mean, Arlovski keeps going, temporarily knocks off a good prospect in Boser, who I think will come back from this better than ever. But yeah, very close fight.
Yeah. And I think, for Arlovski, I think they're going to continue to give him up and comers. And for Boser, it's back to the drawing board. But again, he went the distance. It's not like he got completely dominated. A lot of people felt like he won this fight. He's just got to make some adjustments, but no shame losing to a former UFC champion and Andre Arlovski. So we'll see what is next for both. We got to talk about the bantamweight fight, Raoni Barcelos, Khalid Taha. This was an awesome fight, and Barcelos just showing that he is one of the biggest threats in that division. What kind of surprised me a little bit, maybe it's just, I don't know, people not really watching all the fights, but like, I thought Barcelos looked amazing, and and people are like, "Oh my gosh, I didn't know how good this guy is." It's like, have you not watched his other fights? Like, I thought the win over Nurmagomedov, the fight before, was even more impressive than this one, just because of who he fought. Taha is obviously a game fighter, but Barcelos is one of those guys that can be a threat to anyone, like I said, in that division here. It's weird. He's kind of on that Leo Santos trajectory where like he's got a good record. He's very good. He could probably beat most guys in that division, but because he's so old, the UFC's not giving him that star push than if he was like a 20-year-old. So I know Murad Vivalis really needs an opponent. Apparently he's down to fight him. I would love to see that fight, and credit to Murad, by the way, because that's a dangerous fight. But total domination, and not too surprising. Like I said, this was one of the biggest betting favorites on the card. Your thoughts on his performance?
Yeah, Barcelos, man. He's definitely one of the dark horses at bantamweight, which that's kind of saying a lot considering how good bantamweight is just across the board worldwide. Of course, the UFC's division is and particularly very good. But yeah, Barcelos, went out there pretty much was winning the entire fight. I thought Taha, he did have some moments where he was able to land some big shots, and props to him for being able to hang in there and really survive the onslaught and pressure that Barcelos brings at you, because the guy is just relentless with really all of his attacks and super fun to watch. Maybe didn't get the finish in this fight, but just berserker really when it comes down to it. And the age thing in terms of where he's going. Come on, UFC, you can't use that excuse when you got the two guys in the co-main and main event out here doing what they're doing. So yeah, he definitely deserves a step up. The Dvalishvili fight, man, that's a hell of a matchup, man. I think they should definitely go that route. And excited to see what's next for Barcelos, because definitely a player in this division, and he needs a step up. He really needs one.
Speaking of needing a step up, Giga Chikadze, biggest betting favorite on the card, goes out there, makes short work of Jamie Simmons. Credit to Simmons, he took this on short. Guy who trains at a Pure Vita MMA, just totally outmatched in this one. Chikadze's got to get a step up after this. I personally, I know he got the bonus and it was absolutely well-deserved, but this was supposed to happen, right? Like, I don't think it was any shocker that Chikadze went out there and got a first-round finish like this. I want to see him get a step up. Again, he was supposed to fight, I think it was Jack Short. No, who was he supposed to fight on this card? Let me just double-check so the trolls don't come out. I forget who it was. No, I think this was just a late addition, but either way, they got to get Chikadze a step up here. He's just going through opponents left and right, so they got to do something for Jamie Simmons. He'll be back full camp. We'll see how he looks, but just overmatched. Not much to say about this fight. What are your thoughts?
I will say that the finishing sequence was beautiful. I loved that body kick to head kick combination. That was, oh man, I love that so much. And I think the sounds of it made it all that much more enjoyable for me as a violence fan, you know? Like, the head
Yeah.
kick sounded legitimately like he got hit with, like, a bat, man. It was nasty. It was really nasty stuff, and just an excellent combination of kicks to finish the fight. And yeah, it was supposed to happen. We shouldn't be too surprised by it and all that, but, in terms of the aesthetics of it, loved it. Glorious.
Yeah, like I said, step up though for Giga Chikadze in the next fight. All right, I'm glad I got you on for this next fight. We've got Jan taking on the Jan and Gadea fight is what I want to get. So how do I say her first name? Because I saw your tweet yesterday, confused me a little bit. How do you say her name? I want the official Drake Riggs pick on this one.
Okay, so we are not Chinese cultured people, James, if we're going to be totally honest here. So
Yeah,
for us, I mean, it would be Zhao Yan. Yan is her family name, surname, you know. So in the Chinese culture, they do say the last names first. So Yan Zhaonan, and then it's kind of, the UFC and the sports leagues and whatnot say their names that way. Just it's out of a respect thing, but it's really not wrong to say it. We normally say it because it's a culture difference, and nothing's wrong about it. The only thing that bothered me about what I pointed out yesterday was that the tweet I was mentioning was using it in both directions. So it's just like just want to help put that out there. So
no,
yes,
that's a
Zhao
good idea.
Nan, Yan Zhao Nan. Just you can just say Yan because that is the last name. So
And it's easier
yes,
to
of
say
course.
Jan. It's easier for me because
Yeah.
I'd butcher the first name. So even better. But anyways, I pretty much expected this outcome. You could kind of see what the UFC was doing with the matchmaking heading in, where Claudia, is fought for the title already. She really hasn't lit the world on fire since losing to Andrade. Like she's got some wins over, Hill and Gadea or not Gadea, whatchamacallit, Sparza. So it's like it's one of those things where she's not like I don't think the UFC sees her as another contender. So that's why they're giving her these fights of fighters that are sort of on their way up. And I sort of figured, with 5 decisions, I think heading in here in the UFC with Jan, I figured the same thing was going to happen here. Did this really surprise you? I sort of expected this result.
I mean, James, I think you know that I am definitely maybe the biggest Zhao Yan supporter in
Yeah.
America. I would like to say I'm very high on her. One of my top 2 favorite fighters right now with somebody we will be talking about soon. Yeah, this didn't. The thing that maybe surprised me the most about it was Zhao Nan's lack of she wasn't as she didn't throw as much volume as maybe she normally does, but that was kind of a smart move on her part, just stylistically to not give up any openings for Claudia to take a takedown. And I mean, as the fight went on, she just kind of lost any ability to find openings for that without setting it up, because in the first round she was able to get things down, but after that, I think that Zhao Nan's her just attack and still keeping the jab out there and everything slowed Claudia down more than maybe we could have expected. I thought, for the most part, that Claudia had fixed up that cardio issue that we had seen from her in the past. Specifically, you can look at the Joanna rematch, which is everyone goes to that one. But since then got better. But yeah, definitely she hasn't been the same since the Andrade fight, which, it's Andrade. What are you going to do? So yeah, not super surprising here. A big win though for Zhao. I mean, 6 wins in a row in the UFC. This woman, I'm telling you right now, slightly biased, but this is the number 1 contender for the strawweight title right now. If you think about it, man, 6 wins in a row. She just beat a former title challenger. We don't know. Tatiana's out. We don't know what exactly the weight is with Rose and Whaley. If that's going to happen, I think it will happen. But Zhao is right there now. You give her Carlos Esparza next. At best, that is the
Yeah.
absolute title contender fight right
Well,
there.
here's my theory. I think you do that fight next, and then if she gets past Carla, maybe when there can maybe be some crowds again or something, they got to do that fight in China if they're going to do
Oh,
Zhang.
absolutely.
And so that's why I don't think you'll see it at the Apex in Las Vegas. They would rather hold off for such a big fight because I don't think people realize the magnitude of what that fight would be. Just from some of the reading your stuff and obviously just the fan bases of both. And Zhang is she's a star. You just see the views on YouTube. She's someone that people really like. So yeah, the potential there would be amazing. All right, let's go through the prelims here quickly. Then I'm going to go on a little rant. Trevin Giles getting the win over Bavon Lewis. Bavon Lewis has got to be up there as one of the most disappointing fighters to come out of Contender Series. Just very inconsistent. I'll never forget when he almost beat Uriah Hall, and then I don't know where Hall finishes the fight, and it's just been downhill since there. It's unfortunate because I think Lewis is very talented, but this was a huge win for Trevin Giles, and props to him because this guy's also a full-time police officer. For him to go out there and still get a big win like this, his job potentially was on the line here. Romanov made short work of the Lima. No surprises there. Again, I talk about these setup fights. Do you think they wanted the 35-year-old heavyweight from ATT to win, or they wanted the 29-year-old undefeated guy from Moldova. Shout out to 90 Day Fiance. If anyone watches that show, the guy from Moldova, that guy probably was happy watching that one. But yeah, Romanov making short work there. Give him a step up. Marcin Tybura works for me. I think that's the fight he wanted anyways. How about Darren Elkins getting the submission win over Garrett Gorey? Garrett Gorey been very disappointing in the UFC, but Elkins has still got it. Lives up to his nickname, still took a lot of damage in this fight. Not much to say here. Elkins is going to continue to fight up and comers. Max Griffin takes home a victory and took home Bramajaw's ear in this fight. I recommend not watching that replay. God. Very gruesome. It doesn't take me a lot to get squeamish, but like breaks or like something like this where like a limb is ripped off, that really makes me squeamish. So definitely did not go back and watch the replay on that one. But let's be honest here. Dominant win by Max Griffin. I think him training at Alpha Male really paid dividends in this fight, and he looked great. So good to see Griffin back on the winning track because he's had a lot of close decision losses too. And then obviously opening up the card, Gustavo Lopez. Oh, beautiful performance over Anthony Burchak. Burchak returning to the UFC after a very long time away. And Lopez finally getting a full camp. Still had to switch up an opponent, but goes out there and puts on a good win. I'm glad to see Lopez get the victory because, he had to basically get like a suicide mission in his debut fighting Merab. So for him to go out there and get a big win was amazing. Anything you wanted to point out on the prelims that I just talked about there?
Yeah, I mean, the ear, of course, is just was something like for me. I tweeted this out too, but like eye pokes are kind of the only thing that really gets me, just because as somebody who is legally blind, eye things just really bother me,
Right.
and so that always gets me. But yeah, the ear was like, oh my, it was really something. So yeah, that was nasty is all I want to say.
Gotcha. Yeah, don't go back and watch that one. Pretty gruesome. All right, I mentioned it off the top. We talked about Glover Teixeira's huge win over Thiago Santos, where once again he was an underdog. I forget the stat, but I think he's been an underdog in like the majority of his fights on this winning streak, so good on him. But I told you last week, I thought the UFC dropped the ball by announcing this Adesanya and Blachowicz fight. And I know it's not 100% official, but you know how the UFC is. You know how they are about these super fights. They seem to really stick to them. So I thought that was a mistake. And, to me, it was thinking that Thiago Santos would win this fight. And it would be like, hey, he's got to win over the champ. And obviously that, kind of doesn't make sense if Blachowicz is going to fight someone else and the guy who has a win over him. Well, now it doesn't even matter because Glover won the fight. And to me, this would be such a good story, like I mentioned off the top there, where you've got a guy in Jan Blachowicz who's won the light heavyweight title after a really rough start to his UFC career. And you got a guy in Glover who at 41 looks better than ever. 5-fight win streak, some really solid wins over Anthony Smith and now Santos, both stoppages as well. So that's super impressive in terms of that. And so, Glover gets snubbed on this fight. I mean, I doubt, if I'm giving a percentage on this, I say there's probably a 20 to 30% chance that Glover gets the title shot next. It's probably not going to happen. And then the kicker here, and Drake, this is something I'll get your thoughts on after. The guy doesn't even get a bonus. Like this was you got to look at the optics of this. 41 years old, underdog, took some nasty shots, some shots that probably would have put away most of the, light heavyweights in that division. And for him to go back there and get a comeback win and get no bonus, what? Are you crazy? Now, look, I understand that there were some really impressive finishes, Giga Chikadze being one of them. But like I mentioned, that was an obvious outcome. I don't think if you would have took the two fights together and said what was more likely to happen, you would pick Giga getting the first round finish there. So in my opinion, they got to change the bonus structure. To me, it shouldn't be set at a specific cap. If there's a number of good fighters that have good performances, they should be rewarded for that. And on the flip side, I think if there's a bunch of bad fights, you shouldn't be forced to give out a performance of the night bonus. So this is another reason why I think they got to change the bonus structure, because Glover Teixeira should have got another bonus in this fight. So like I mentioned, Glover getting snubbed twice, not getting the next title shot most likely, and also not getting the bonus. Drake, I got to get your thoughts on this.
Yeah, no, I think you make totally great points there. And you look at, they gave fight of the night to Barcelos and Taha, which this has always been kind of a controversial take, I think, that I've had. But in my opinion, that fight, yes, entertaining fight, but not really a good fight because it wasn't all that competitive, right? I think that you need a competitive fight to say it's a good fight or a fight of the night. So, I mean, I could have gone without them getting that bonus there just because, yeah, it was pretty much the Barcelo show where Taha had his moments. That moment for Glover, I think, far supersedes what happened there. And then you could have given out 4 performance of the night bonuses like they've been doing in the past couple weeks anyway. So, yeah, definitely a head scratcher. But James, I do have a question for you related to this that I was really interested in getting your thoughts on, because our buddy, shout out to JHK, he did not like Steve-O at the media. And this is related because Steve-O asked about Glover not getting a bonus. So I want to know your thoughts on the celebrity media member we had this past weekend getting be a media member.
Yeah, so I have sort of mixed reviews on it. Obviously, the UFC wanted to do it for some extra press. They got like a guy who people know in the mainstream is answering questions. But you're right. It's so funny because the UFC is so strict on what media can come in, but then some celebrity can waltz in and ask whatever he wants. It just seems kind of unfair in a way. So I kind of have mixed reviews because I can see from the UFC's perspective where it's like, hey, we got a celebrity. It's like I remember back in the day when they didn't have a lot of people watching the UFC, they used to put up like Michael Clark Duncan or someone on the screen to be like, look, someone famous is watching the UFC. I think it's kind of the same thing here where they're like, hey, Steve-O just happened to be here. Let's get him to ask a question. But I agree. I mean, if you're going to set a strict precedence for who's allowed to answer, to be accredited to cover your events, having some celebrity walk in kind of is a slap in the face, the whole thing. So I have sort of a lukewarm response, but I get John's perspective because there's someone who should have UFC credentials for the work that he does, just like, a lot of people in this industry. So that's how I feel about that. Let's get to the UFC Vegas 14 card. We don't have a main event. This is actually the first time I think I've ever done a preview where the main event is still TBA at this point. If you guys haven't heard, Islam Makhachev off the card. We're now hearing because of a staph infection. I think that was updated today, but yesterday we didn't know the exact reason. Speedy recovery to him. So they need a fighter to take on Rafael dos Anjos. Before we preview this card, I think Michael Chandler would make sense, although I can kind of see it from the UFC's perspective where they're like, they just made this big signing. Do they really want him to risk losing to Dos Anjos and saving this event on short notice? Would they not want to build him up? So I can understand that. Drew Dober needs an opponent because obviously Diego Ferreira fell out. Ali Quinta, I think, is still on the sidelines. Who are you thinking could potentially save this? Or, don't be surprised if the UFC just does not do a main event and it's Al Hassan and Chaos Williams instead. But just your thoughts on what could happen this Saturday.
I mean, Allison and Williams, that could be fun for 5 rounds. I will say that, even though I'm assuming they probably won't do that with the late notice. So never mind. Yeah, I think that if Chandler really wanted to get even more people on his side, he goes in there and, just dominates RDA. Like, that's what he goes out and intends to do. And I think that he would probably beat Dos Anjos, depending on how he looks at lightweight. Kind of a lot of question marks surrounding that. But I don't think there's any chance that it happens just because of how the spot that they've already put Chandler in, where he is, borderline could get the next title shot, even though, probably Connor Dustin and everything, but he's right up there. So seems like it would be a weird move for them to do considering all they're paying him and all this kind of stuff. But yeah, I think Dober is pretty much the perfect guy to put in there right now. A guy who deserves get a name opponent, even though it's not somebody ranked as he should be getting, but it's just a matter of circumstances and all that. So I think Dober is definitely the perfect guy, and that would be a fun matchup as is. So yeah.
Now, with having Drake on this show, we're getting one of the best minds when it comes to women's MMA, like I mentioned. So just for the prelims, we're just going to talk about the 2 women's fights on here. We'll start first with Randa Marcos taking on Kanako Murata. Hope I said that right, Drake. Don't scold me here. But I noticed right now on blitzbet.eu, so if you're Canadian watchers out there, you can bet on blitzbet.eu. The odds are up right now. Actually, we don't have odds for this fight. We do on the Yoder and Granger fight. We'll get to that in a second. But most books have Murata as the favorite in this fight, which I'm sure Drake will agree with that. Where are you leaning on this one? I know you're a huge fan of the Japanese fighter, but I'm Canadian, Drake, so I gotta stick with my own here. But I'll give you my breakdown in a sec. But first, let's hear your thoughts on this fight.
I'm huge fans of both of them, which is why I'm very upset.
Fan. Yeah.
I'm very upset that this is the replacement that happened. I'm happy for Randa to get the opportunity and everything, but man, I don't want to see either of them lose. This sucks. It's such a bummer in that regard for me, but I'm happy that Murata still gets to fight as well. And James, man, do you remember last year when we were in
you're in New York and we were at the karaoke bar and you were watching the fight on your phone? Of course I remember that.
I had to see Kanako win the Invicta title against Emily Ducote while we were in the bar. So yeah. that was a little memorable.
That's the dedication Drake brings to the table, by the way. If anyone wants to question Drake's dedication, that's it right there. We're in this nice bar having some drinks. Drake's on his phone watching the women's fight, which all the credit to you. I think that's awesome.
Had to, man. I mean, I've been so high on her even before that and everything. And I was telling you then, I was like, just wait, she's gonna be one of those fighters. Like, I don't prop up people too much. So like I mentioned Zhao Nan earlier, and then somebody we'll talk about later. Murata is that person for me. Those are my top 2 right now who I'm really keeping eyes on. And I think that, instantly Murata, this is how good she is. She's already top 3 wrestlers in the division, right behind Carla Esparza and Tatiana Suarez, of course. So I mean, the potential there for her is incredible. And this matchup with Randa, I like more for Kanako than the Livia Souza fight that she was getting before this, just because Livia presents a lot more of a BJJ threat on the ground, and her striking isn't too bad, even though she's kind of had a lackluster run in the UFC so far, unfortunately. But for Randa, man, it's do or die. I'm really afraid that if she loses, she's out. I mean, it would be her first. She's already on her first losing streak, I think, since if you're counting Ultimate Fighter, she was on a losing streak then. But went back and forth, back and forth. Finally, loses 2 in a row for the first time ever, excluding that 3 in a row. I feel like that would be it. And this is a very tough matchup for her. I think that Murata will just be too good in the wrestling. Randa will need to keep her off. But I mean, I just can't see it happening. And I'm telling you, I think that Murata will end up getting either a rear naked choke or a Von Flue. I'm predicting a Von Flue because that is a submission that she has hit twice in a row. The only female fighter to do so multiple times. And I mean, one of 2 in major organizations to even get that submission. The female Oven St. Preux in that regard. But yeah, that's a submission that she really is sneaky with and works on. So I wouldn't be surprised if she hits another there just because Randa will, I think, engage in the grappling and try and, play with it a little bit. But it's too big of a risk, man. And I'm afraid that it'll cost her in probably the second round.
Canadian bias aside, just want to get that out of the way. I do think Randa has a shot here, and you talked about the wrestling, and obviously, it's something to behold. I think we can both agree Randa has fought the better competition overall in the grand scheme of things, right? And you look at who she's losing to, Dern, which, I mean, she played right into Dern's game. You don't go to the ground with Mackenzie Dern. Bad idea. Amanda Ribas, who we know now is, getting a huge push. She's fighting Michelle Watterson. They really like her. She's an up-and-comer as well. Beat Yoder, which is a close fight. Lost to Claudia. That was one of the worst fights ever. Don't watch that one. And then the Angela Hill win, which is such an odd win in the grand scheme of things because Hill has looked amazing. I mean, her last fight, I know she lost a close fight. But to finish Angela Hill, very impressive. So Randa's had a very weird career. You mentioned, like, you're right. That's the first time Randa's lost back-to-back fights in her career. Those tough fights were exhibition. So we'll see. But I think, you're right. This is it. She's 35 years old. She's not getting any younger. And I think she knows this is it. And that's probably why she jumped on this opportunity, knowing that she probably does have a little bit more experience. I don't think she'll get submitted. I think she learned her lesson in the Dern fight. At least she should have, because it's like, what are you doing? Why play to your opponent's strengths? I think she'll try and keep this on the feet. And if she does, I do think she has a chance here, Drake. We'll see. You mentioned the wrestling. We'll see who the better wrestler is. Randa sort of really worked on that over the last couple of years. The other thing I'll mention with Randa is that, this is actually, I think, the first fight in her UFC career. I haven't had a chance to interview her. Maybe I'll try something this week. But, Randa, I know for the last camp against Dern, she could not really train across the border because of the travel restrictions with COVID. As far as I understand, when I spoke to her before that last fight, it seemed like that cleared up. So at least this time around, she'll get a better camp getting to utilize those gyms that she trains down in Michigan. So I think that's an ace in her cap. And like I said, I just think way more experience. I think that could be something here to look at because Randa's usually in close decisions for the most part outside of losing to Dern. The only other fighter to finish her in the UFC is Courtney Casey, and that was back in 2016. And I think that was when she was at TriStar, and she was really sort of actually, no, the TriStar fight was the Kovalkiewicz fight, but never mind. Yeah. We're spending a lot of time on this fight, but basically what I'm saying is I'm picking Marcos because I think she has a chance here because I just look at the experience. But again, listen more to Drake because he's more well-versed in
the real main event, my man.
There you go. I saw your tweet about this being the main event. Yeah, maybe. We'll see. I'm joking, obviously. Okay, let's get to the other women's fight on here. Also a strawweight fight. Ashley Yoder, Miranda Granger. Really interested by this one because both, Yoder's been, a bit lackluster in the Octagon, and Granger obviously coming off that disappointing loss in her last fight, the first loss of her career. And if you look at the odds right now on BlitzBet, this is close. This is about as close as it gets. Right now, Ashley Yoder, -111 on BlitzBet. Miranda Granger, -110. So a few little things to note. Yoder obviously getting to do a little bit of cross-training over the last couple fights, which I think has helped her, including getting to work at San Diego Combat Academy. The biggest knock on Yoder, at least in her career, is that she hasn't been able to train with a lot of women. She trains with Dan Henderson at Team Quest, so she's not getting that familiarity with a lot of the women's fighters. But over at San Diego Combat Academy, you got Pearl Gonzalez, Alina Leigh McFarland, Liz Carmouche. So I think that's a big feather in her cap as well. And then with Granger, just listening to her after the loss in her last fight, she had that, obviously, that issue where she had a blood clot. This was discovered after the fight, and she was, in the hospital for a while. She just had a terrible fight, her last fight, going down there, wasn't feeling, her best, had a bad weight cut, the travel time, all that. It was the first time she fought internationally. So, and Amanda Lemos, very, very talented. So just, imagine having a terrible camp and then fighting a killer like Lemos. Just was a recipe for disaster. The only concern, obviously, with Granger is that she hasn't fought since December of last year. So it's going to be almost a year that she last stepped in the Octagon, whereas Elise Yoder fought earlier this year. She was supposed to fight Nadia Kassem before Kassem got injured, so they rebooked this fight. I'm with the odds here. I think it's very even. I give a slight edge to Ashley Yoder because she tends to, usually when it does go to the distance, she does tend to sort of edge that one out a little bit. And just the fact she's been more of a mainstay in the UFC. But who's your pick on this one? Because I'm very curious to see your thoughts. Granger, a fellow Pacific Northwest fighter, Drake.
Yes, yes, she is from the Washington home state here. Yeah, you mentioned Randa's experience in the last matchup. I mean, in terms of like fighting better competition and everything, that's Yoder in this
Yeah.
one. But then, they're going against the prospects, I believe, that have obviously more upside, I think, at this point. I think we've kind of seen the ceiling with Yoder, but at the same time, man, she's one of those fighters who really, it seems like no matter the matchup, for the most part, she will make it very close and arguably get robbed or,
Yeah.
be in a split decision type of fight. Like people thought that she beat was Mackenzie Dern, and then was it ABC? I mean, there's been multiple fights for Ashley Yoder now where, things were very close, and they're generally close in general. So with this fight with Granger, I think she's a great prospect, somebody who I've been keeping an eye on for a good while now as well. But yeah, all the things kind of led to bad results in the last fight, and I think that she'll want to rebound here and make things right, which she has the ability to do. I think she just overall a little bit better everywhere, just a more skilled fighter, and has more promise to her. But at the same time, it's like Twitter is just, she's just one of those fighters who has that thing about her where she's just never out of it, just a gamer. And I know that she also did some training with Jessie Jess before her last fight.
That's right.
So I mean, yeah, getting more work with the females as time goes on and everything. So that's good for her. But yeah, it is definitely close to call. Just being an Ashley Yoder fight, but I have to lean towards the fighter who, I believe is just a little bit better, a little everywhere, and better upside. So Miranda Granger, but will be close. Wouldn't be surprised if it's a split. But I have to lean towards Granger. Yeah.
And we're sticking with the women's strawweights as well. There's a lot of these fights on here. So good thing we got Drake on. We've got Kay Hanson taking on Cory Mckenna. This has got to be one of the youngest fights ever put together in UFC history. They're both 21 years old. So clearly the UFC is being like, well, who's the better prospect, right? So Kay Hanson, big favorite though, minus 227, Cory Mckenna plus 185. I mentioned this on my podcast. Hanson, I thought, she looked good in her last fight, not great. She did have some trouble with Jin Frey, especially early in that matchup, but was able to go out there and get the third round submission. Before that, had that nice win, nice decision win. And then, she's had a lot of good victories already. And even her losses, I mean, she's losing to really good fighters like Erin Blanchfield and so there's a lot to take away from someone in Hanson who, does, even though she's got 10 fights, she does have a lot of experience already just being 21. And Cory Mckenna, obviously upsetting Vanessa Demopoulos in her last fight, getting that decision win in that one where she was just absolutely dominant in that one. And then even prior to that, fighting in Cage Warriors, a lot of experience as well. So this is a good test for both. I almost don't like matchups like this because it's like, why not just keep them on separate paths until they're more established and then fight? But, we've seen it before with like, Mike Trezano and Grant Dawson, or like, I don't know. There's a whole bunch of fights that they've done before where they're trying to figure out who the better prospect is. I do think at this point right now, I do think it's Kay Hanson. There's moments where you watch her fight and you're like, okay, she's doing something a little bit extra than other fighters. And the ground game is just amazing as well. But this is also one of those ones where at 2-1 odds, I would almost stay away. I'd almost just sit back and enjoy this one because Mckenna could surprise as well too. Where are you leaning on this one, Drake? Because the pick for me is going to be Kay Hanson, but I'm not. I think both have a lot to bring to the table, and I think every fight we're seeing them get better and better.
I agree, and I've been watching pretty much Kay Hanson's whole career now, going back to the Invicta days and everything. And it's funny because I felt like, as good of a prospect that she obviously was and still is, like prior to the UFC and everything, I didn't feel like she was necessarily ready yet for the UFC going into that Jin fight. And it's kind of weird going from Jin, to Cory Mckenna now, where it's like experienced former atomweight champion and everything, and then back down to the same kind of
fight
level
that would have taken place in Invicta. Do you know what I mean?
Exactly. Yeah. So it's kind of a weird how they did it this way and everything. And I think that the Jin fight was a little bit short notice from what I remember, but
It was, yeah, good point.
yeah, Jin did look very good in the first round on the feet. Not surprising. I mean, kind of surprising that she looked that good. We was kind of not sure what to expect from her at strawweight and everything. But Kay Hanson's bread and butter, yeah, is her dominant ground game that she has. And yeah, I think that it's another thing where even though these are both prospects, she has fought the better competition so far and looked good, and taken things away from the losses that she's had against fellow great prospects like Erin Blanchfield, who, man, watch out for that girl, you guys. But yeah, Kay Hanson, I think that I've just seen more from her that I like a lot more, and I think it's smart to bring her down because I didn't want him to rush, because I was afraid that after she beat somebody like Jin, they'd be like, all right, here we go. Maybe not right after the races, but they would have given her somebody who's a little bit more experienced, kind of push her a
Like
little
you
bit in
don't
that
want
direction.
Chase Hooper and Alex Caceres. That's what you don't want, right? And I mean, obviously Hanson's a little bit more established than Chase Hooper, but you know what I mean? Like you don't want to, because otherwise, what's the point in having a prospect if you're not going to build them up properly?
Exactly, and especially in the strawweight division, which is just killer after killer after killer. It's like, oh, let's pump the brakes here. But yeah, Cory McKenna, this is a good matchup, I think, for both of them. It'll be really interesting to see. I think that it could be very close just because McKenna is definitely another good prospect who, is going out there to kind of prove. I think that there's more around Kay Hanson and more people know about her. So that'll kind of fuel McKenna in this matchup to, kind of prove that she is just as good, if not better, and all that. But I think we've just seen more from Kay Hanson, and her ground game has looked really good, and I think that could be the X factor. But don't sleep on Cory McKenna. But yeah, I have to go with the person who's fought the better competition, and just seeing more from Kay Hanson, I think that I've liked.
We're going to go to the men's middleweight division. We've got Antonio Arroyo taking on Eric Anders, your boy, stepping up on short notice to take this one. And right now, the odds makers have Eric Anders is the slight favorite at -147, Arroyo at +121. So I did have a chance to speak to Eric before this fight. He basically was on Fight Island cornering Walt Harris and didn't even bother going back home to Alabama. He just stayed in Vegas, trained at Extreme Couture, made use of the PI. So I actually think that's a good move for him because had he gone home, Walt's not going to fight right now. You're not going to be able to train with a lot of people over there. So for him to stay there, I thought that was a smart move. But Eric needs to win this. I mean, he's been pretty up and down in his career ever basically since losing to Machida. He hasn't really looked the same. And, he yo-yoed a bit at 205 and then came back down. And this is a big opportunity for him. But he's fighting a guy in Arroyo who just does not have the experience and, lost his debut as well back in November of last year. He won, of course, on Contender Series, beating Steven Regman by arm triangle. So we know this guy's got a great ground game. He's a finisher. But Anders has been pretty durable outside of the one stoppage loss to Thiago Santos. In general, he's a guy that we've seen is very tough to finish. This is kind of like the theme of this card. Like they're taking guys that have way more experience against, up and comers. And I think in this case, Anders' experience is probably why he's the favorite here. And I'm going to pick him, but I will warn people, Anders just looked so bad in that last fight against Christoph Jocko, speaking to him about the fight. He didn't even want to mention, he was just like, look, I was embarrassed about that one. We just take that as the L and move on. So at this point, I don't feel that confident in taking Eric Anders, but saying that he should win this fight. This is one of those fights it's his to lose, in my opinion, especially if it stays standing. I feel very confident that Anders' striking will be the difference in this one. But I just want to warn people that, Anders very inconsistent, and that is something to worry about here. So who are you picking in this one, Drake?
Yeah, I don't have too much to add to it. I think you summed it up very perfectly there. I mean, it has been weird. It's kind of, for how the trajectory that he was on, it's been a bit of a fall from grace. And I mean, you could argue that he's kind of lost more fights than he should have. Like that Gerald Meerschaert fight, I think that was a robbery. Should have went to Meerschaert in that one. Yet this has not looked the same since the Machida fight. And I mean, even the what was it, Tim Williams that he fought, and he got that beautiful Hexagon.
Didn't look great early on in that fight. Yeah, you're right.
So, I mean, it's been just very weird for him, but I do like the change-ups that he's done, and I mean, more experience in his favor. It's kind of a must win, I think, even though he's only lost the one fight recently. But I mean, I got to go with him as well. Not sure how he does it. Probably a decision to be safe, just because it seems like he has fallen off a bit. But it's the smart pick, I would say.
All right, we're not doing the heavyweight fight between Mays and Martinez because that's actually on the prelims. Tapology has got to change that. So in case people are like, what happened to that fight? It's because it's on the prelims. So we're actually going to go what right now is the co-main event between Julian Marquez and Safarov. And right now the odds makers have on Blitzbet, Julian Marquez is a big favorite at -312, Safarov at +245. That's really steep. Look, I get it. Safarov has not been great. He tried his hand at light heavyweight, didn't go very well, lost to Volante, lost to Tyson Pedro, got the one win over Nick, and I'm going to pronounce his last name. It's too hard to pronounce here, but also lost his middleweight debut to Vieira in his last fight too. The problem is that Marquez hasn't fought since July of 2018. I was at that fight a couple years ago, and he's battled some injuries. Julian, it's been pretty well documented that, he nearly had to hang him up because of the injury that he had. The one interesting thing with Marquez for this fight is that he is back home in Kansas City, where he grew up, getting to train at Glory MMA, which I think is a good fit for him. James Krause, one of the best coaches in the business. You guys saw that a few weeks ago when he co-hosted the show. Wealth of knowledge. I think that's a plus for Marquez because he would have just been at Syndicate, and, he's not just getting the training partners that he probably needs, whereas at Glory, he's getting some different looks over there, including I know he worked a lot with Jason Witt, who came off a pretty dominant win a couple weeks ago. So minus 311 for Julian Marquez, way too steep for me, especially with a guy coming off that much of a layoff. And Marquez is 30, is and has more experience. I mean, he's still got some good wins. Let's not even forget when he beat Phil Hawes in Contender Series. That was a great knockout, which is what got him in the UFC. So the pick is going to be Julian Marquez, but there's no way you should bet him at minus 312, in my opinion. Way too high for a guy who hasn't fought that long. How are you looking at this one, Drake?
Yeah, no, I definitely agree there. And I mean, because Safarov, as not great as he might be technically or anything, the man's a banger, man. He throws some hard shots, and if he lands on you, it can be trouble. But Julian Marquez has proven to be pretty durable. But yeah, the layoff is a big question mark there with him, and what he had to go through to get here. What did he almost lose his leg or something like that? Crazy.
Yeah, it was pretty nuts that way. Yeah, so luckily he was able to get that all kind of figured out and saw the right people, and yeah, he's now back fighting, which is great.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, I just think that the case here, the safe thing would be for him to try and take Safarov down, because it seems like he's a fighter who just doesn't really care about working his grappling defense or anything like that. Just kind of a unique character as well. If we're going to be honest, we've seen his old stare downs from over in Russia. Things get a little heated. It's just kind of a thing that he's known for. But yeah, Safarov, if he's has to keep it on the feet, and then we could land some bombs. But even then, Marquez should be more technical than him and be able to outbox him, but it's a risk. So I think the smart move would be for him to take him down, and I think that he should be able to do it at will. We have seen Marquez, has a pretty well-rounded skill set, I would say, but it comes down to how he looks coming off of the layoff. But have to go with what we've seen before and what we know from the guy and what he can do. So yeah, I gotta take Marquez, but definitely the odds are it's a gamble. That's why it's called gambling, right?
Yes, no, for sure. We'll quickly go through this main event. I'll do a quick rant at the end here, only because I got to be out of here in about 5 minutes. But I'm going to keep this pretty simple here. Razak Al Hassan, Chaos Williams. Right now, that is the main event. Al Hassan, about a 2-1 favorite right now on blitzbet.eu. If this fight stays standing, I think Al Hassan probably knocks out Chaos Williams. Chaos Williams has a great record at 10-1 and looked awesome in his last fight, finishing Alex Morono. But I think Morono didn't look his best in that one. He had a couple teammates lose that night from Fortis at UFC 247. It was just a weird night for him. And so I don't think Morono was at his best. And so Williams was able to take advantage of that. And with Al Hassan, it was the same thing. I think he just had a terrible performance. He missed weight. It was a huge layoff coming into that fight. Had to travel. With this one, nice flight over from Texas to Las Vegas. I think he looks a lot better. Even though he's 35, Al Hassan still has some of the best knockout power at welterweight. If this stays standing, I think he gets a finish here. I'm taking Al Hassan by knockout. Which way are you going in this one, Drake?
Yeah, I mean, I do like Chaos Williams a lot. He's a very fun guy to watch and everything. I think he has a chance here, but man, yeah, it's just Al Hassan kind of has that difference maker kind of power. And he's relentless with it too when he wants to be, as we kind of saw in his last fight and everything. So I mean, it's hard to go against him here. I think that Chaos Williams could catch him, kind of surprise everybody, but yeah, it's really hard to go against Al Hassan. Another case where a lot of these matchups with a guy who is just fought better competition, pretty substantially. And that is our main event. So that's good fun. But yeah, it's hard to go against Al Hassan. I got to pick him to, he'll find the knockout at some point.
Speaking of main events, I got to give kudos to Jack Hermanson here. If you guys can see the news, Darren Till is out of his fight, and now Jack Hermanson is fighting Kevin Holland. Kudos to this guy. Here's a guy that had to endure, Adesanya and Blachowicz fighting next. So his fight, which was a big fight in the middleweight division, is not going to mean a whole lot. And it's going to mean even less now. He's got to fight an unranked guy in Kevin Holland. And by the sounds of it, at least what his manager was saying, is that Jack Hermanson went through 5 different opponents before taking Kevin Holland. So kudos to him. He didn't need to take this fight, but I think he knows the importance of keeping active. Kevin Holland, 4-0 already this year, albeit not against the greatest competition, but still a very dangerous threat in the middleweight division. So for Hermanson to take this fight when he really didn't even need to, he could have probably waited to either rebook the Till fight or, get another opponent in there. You got to give him kudos here. A lot of fans don't give Hermanson the credit he deserves, especially after that last one over Calvin Gastelum. It's like no one's talking about that anymore. And for him to go out there and take a guy in Kevin Holland, where really Holland has everything to gain here. He's unranked. He's got 4 wins in a row. He's way more active. Holland has everything to gain here. For Hermanson to do that, you got to give him kudos here. So I just wanted to give a quick shout out to Jack Hermanson for taking this fight, still trying to pave his path towards a middleweight title shot, even though, like I said, a lot of fans don't see him as a contender. But if he wins this fight, Drake, he'll be 6-1 in his last 7. That to me is title shot worthy. Your thoughts, and we'll wrap things up here.
Yeah, I mean, that would be kind of crazy, for him to come in and pull that off, but definitely possible. Yeah, I mean, especially at the middleweight division too, which is, it's kind of weird, where Adesanya, we've been talking about it a little bit. The guy for him was Cannonier, assuming he won. And then Whitaker goes out there and yeah, he's kind of the guy now, but we saw that rematch the fight it still feels very recent to me and, wasn't all that close or anything. So Adesanya actually limited in challengers, which feels weird because he's still a pretty new champion and everything. But yeah, it would be hard to deny in that case. Don't have too much to add, man. You summed it up well.
That I did. Drake, thanks so much for joining us here on the program. It's always good catching up with you, man. Where can people get a hold of you on social media and anything you got coming out this week? The floor is yours, man.
All right, appreciate it, James. As always, it's always good times with you, my man. At Drake Riggs _ that is on Twitter, Instagram. Everything is on my Twitter, though. That's my main stuff. And yeah, as for what I got coming out and everything, the WMA Today podcast, that is the show with Steve King and I. We do it every week on Wednesdays, where we talk about all the news and fights coming up, and specifically the women's fights, because got to give them some love, of course. And that is every Wednesday. But tomorrow we will be doing Tuesday because of XFC on Wednesday, because Jessica Aguilar is fighting Daniel Taylor. Got to watch that fight rather than go in at the same time. So that will be tomorrow at 5:30, the show. And then, of course, I have another show, Broadened Horizon, where I speak with plenty of, Japanese speaking, fighters, Ryzen fighters, all these fighters, and just kind of help expose them on the English side of things. So working on episode 4 right now. And actually episode 3, I spoke with Kanako, who was fighting this week. So you can go check that one out. Great chat with her. Of course, we didn't talk about the Randa fight because this was before that, but still good stuff. Great episode. Love doing that show. I recently spoke to Vanessa Porto as well. That is on myMMAnews.com. Just recently signed with Bellator, the Invicta champion, one of the greatest flyweights of all time. Good stuff. Spoke to KSW champion Thomas Narcoon recently. He's fighting this weekend. And I also spoke to Carolina Opshash, who is fighting on that card. Do you like my pronunciation there? Nailed it. I've been working on that. So, very, very good flyweight prospect. And man, I'm going to tell you, I absolutely love her story, man. She was a journalist like us, and now she's fighting. And, it's just a really great story. I really want you guys to check that one out because I really like that one. I'm really critical of my own stuff, but please check that out. And, she's just kind of a star in the making, I think. A great personality. She fights this weekend as well against Jacina Haba. Also spoke to Jessica Aguilar, who I mentioned there. And, I've got to give one last shout to plug Becoming Mega Magoo, the Megumi Fuji story, my big magnum opus of a story that I would call it. I did that a couple months ago now, but please check it out, you guys, because that is it's a small book, I would call it, and just an in-depth story in the life and times of one of the greatest fighters we've ever seen, Megumi Fuji. So yeah, I will leave it there. I had a lot of things I wanted to share.
There you go. At Drake's Rigs _ where you can get a hold of him on Twitter. Like I said, one of the best resources for women's MMA. You won't find anyone better. This guy covers everything from, Invicta to the international stuff. So he's a huge resource for me and a good friend of mine as well. As you guys know, follow me on Twitter at Lynch on Sports, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube. Subscribe to the Line Movement YouTube channel. Give us a like. All my best interviews are going to be on this channel, so you don't want to miss any of the notifications. We had Yuri Prohaska last week. We had Robert Whitaker. We're supposed to have some other big guests this week. Don't want to say who they are yet in case they don't pan out, but make sure you hit that subscribe button. I want to thank you guys so much for watching here today. We really appreciate it. Enjoy the fights this weekend, whatever the main event might be. And I will see you back here next week, 1:15 p.m. Eastern time here on Octagon Outlook. Thanks so much for watching.